Hello, and welcome to the Radiant Mission Podcast. My name is Rebecca Toomey, and we are on a mission to encourage and inspire you as you're navigating through this life and with your relationship with Christ. We have been in a series on homeschooling, and today we welcome Joanna Meliti. She is a homeschool mom and the co-founder of Home and School Tutoring Pods in Strawberry Plains, Tennessee. She has an MS degree in inclusive education and was a classroom teacher for 11 years. During her full-time teaching career, she was a teacher, mentor, K-3 team leader, school board, teacher representative, language arts content writer, and was awarded the Dean's Award in Education. For the past 5 years, she has been focused on tutoring students and supporting parents in their homeschooling journey. In her free time, she enjoys hiking with her husband of 16 years and 6-year-old daughter and reading a good book with a biscotti and a hot cup of tea. I love that. Joanna, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Last week, Joanna shared what inspired her to transition from a full-time classroom teacher to homeschooling, along with what motivated her to co-founding Home and School Tutoring Pods. So if you are tuning in for the first time, be sure to listen in on last week's episode for part 1. Today, we are diving right into part 2, and it has a large focus on overcoming learning challenges. So you're not going to want to miss this. Let's get into it. So tell us a little bit about some of the most common learning challenges or even learning disabilities. I don't know what the correct language is to use here, but that you have been seeing in homeschool settings and how parents can help to navigate those particular challenges.
Yeah, so I think, in talking about reading, we're kind of on the reading topic. Um, I see and hear parents talk, "Oh, my kid's not reading," or they're facing some of these challenges. And if we look at what some of the other countries are doing, we know about Finland and how they score. We are not. We're forcing. So the mindset is we force kids into reading starting at age 5. Kindergarten used to be all play, and now the big shift has been they need to come into kindergarten knowing their letters and sounds because they need to start reading a lot sooner. So we think our kids are behind if they're not reading by 6 or by 7. And there's so much research to support that that young kids are primarily right brain learners. And until age 7, when there's this huge development that happens, this rapid growth at age 7, do they then shift to right brain? And that's where reading takes place. And so, one of the challenges that I think parents might face at home with learning is, what if my kid's not doing enough? What if they're not where they're supposed to be? Well, the mind shift is they don't have to be anywhere by a certain point based on what society tells us. Because for a kid
Yeah.
to start reading at 7 or even 8 years old is okay. They're not going to be, if a kid starts reading at 4 or 5, there's no research to support that they will, quote, be a better reader than someone who reads at age 7.
Mhm.
There's that window where it can all happen within that child's time and readiness.
Mhm.
There are, there's a book, it's called Phonics from A to Z. And I would recommend that book to families that are kind of maybe wondering, what's the best way to navigate reading and some of the learning challenges my child might have, because it focuses heavily on phonics.
Mm.
And so if you're facing some challenges with reading, then I would encourage families to kind of take it a step back and see what they're using, what their approach is, and kind of start looking into um, other methods of,
Okay.
of helping their child learn, because not every kid is going to learn the same way.
Mhm.
Um, for math, one of the biggest things, um, making things so concrete, so visual. There's different stages that kids go through when they're learning. And if we can give them manipulatives when they're learning, especially with math, it's going to make it so much more concrete to them, because we don't want to move into like the abstract thinking of what's 3 plus 5 until they're at least 12 years old. And so, we kind of look at our approach to what we're doing. Are we helping them grasp with ideas with like stories, examples, real life experiences? So one of the things is if you're having learning challenges or seeing learning challenges at home, I would just, go back to that mindset of play. Everything goes back to making it more real to the kid. I
Mhm.
love teaching fractions with pizza.
Yeah, yeah, there you go.
Or Legos even. There's so much you can do with your curriculum that's going to make it real world. My daughter made a map the other day. She wanted to pretend we were going on a hike, and she got a compass. And I said, and we've talked about compasses before. We did, north, south, east, west on maps. And I said, well, you need to draw a compass rose on your map so we know which way is north. And she was drawing a circle and trying to label it like the compass she had in front of her. And I thought, huh, I am going to use this as a teachable moment, how the compass looks different,
Mhm,
when it's on a map versus the one we're holding or looking at,
mhm,
in real
mhm,
life. So, just kind of taking real life experiences and making sure that you're diving into what it is that your child is struggling with, um, like number sense, for example. A lot of kids don't have number sense early on. So that's where there's like this deep understanding of numbers. So we get to like third grade and it's like, my kid is really struggling with place value. We have to step back, make sure they have number sense. Do they have the deep understanding of how numbers work? And
mm,
so,
mm,
yeah,
mm,
when there's challenges happening at home, it's really important to step back. What are some of the things that you can do to make it concrete? Kind of address some of those early skills that might have been missed, so that everything is building. And that's the beauty of homeschooling.
mhm.
And typical schooling, it's just your traditional classroom. We're doing a lesson and we're moving. We're just going on. With homeschooling, you can always step back and see, okay, what's missing? What do we need to kind of review and go deeper into before we try to build on those skills?
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. That's very, very interesting. And interesting about the number sense side of things too. I think my daughter is trying to figure out how numbers work now, where she's asking me how old I am all the time
Yeah,
and how old Nana is, for
yeah.
example. And she gets confused because we both have a 7 in
Mm,
our age.
mhm.
Mine obviously being a lot younger than my mom's since she's my mother, but she doesn't quite understand that yet. So
Mhm,
sometimes she'll say, "Mom, you're 70?" And I'll say,
mhm.
"No,
Yeah.
not 70." And try to explain to her that 70 is more than
Mhm.
how old am I? 27? No, just kidding.
Yeah, yeah,
27.
yeah.
And it's interesting because I can tell she's learning it. And the other day she asked me, "Mom, how old are you?" And I was like, "You know what? I'm going to say something different this time. Let's test her." I said, "I'm 6."
Mm.
And she said, "No, you're not.
Mhm.
You're more than 6." And then she said I was 70. And I'm like, "That's closer to the 6, but, again, teachable moment, a time for us to have that conversation again because it does take time for them to make the connection with numbers that
With
they
numbers.
progress and they grow, and of course, especially as you're learning 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and up.
Mhm. Yeah.
So very
And
interesting.
there's 5 main skills that go with number sense. Um, and we say, well, there's so much technology now. I can just pick up my phone and I always have, I remember going to school and my teacher telling me, you're not going to have a calculator to carry around with you, when you're older.
I
So you need
remember
to
that too.
learn this. Yeah. And what do we have now? We have a calculator on our phone we can just pull out and use. So I don't know. I don't know about that, but
Honestly, it's even worse because we could literally go on Google and say, if what is 3% of 78, and
yeah,
it will tell us. And we
yeah,
don't even have to make the calculation. We can say it in words.
yeah. Yep. And it's going to give us that answer. And we won't even know how it came to that answer, but
Exactly. We won't know. We won't have the
whether to
understanding and the
question it.
comprehension. We'll have the answer if it's giving us the right answer, what we're depending on, right?
Yeah. But the challenge with not solidifying those 5 main skills that come with number sense early on is it's not going to allow for the progress in other disciplines of math.
Mhm,
So much like reading, we have this foundation we want to build and we want to grow and develop skills as we move into higher disciplines. But yeah, so if families are seeing some learning challenges at home, are we using an approach that best meets the child. Like we talked earlier on, are they more musical or are they more kinesthetic? Do they need to hop on hopscotch? Do we need to make a hopscotch and count by fives? Or, are they more visual and want to move the bead, on the number chart so that they can make it more tactile and things like that? So, um, multiple intelligences is always great to look at. Piaget's um, theory is great to look at for, the progression of development that kids go through, and what that might mean for your approach as a mom that's saying, well, my kid's kind of struggling with something. What can I do to help them? Kind of look at where they are. And there's certain curriculums I like only because, they've done the research. They try to structure things so that kids don't have learning gaps. Because I do think there are certain
Mm,
areas of education we want to be more intentional about addressing skills, um, so that those gaps don't widen as they get older. And I think math is one of those, very
okay.
intentional about building um, that number sense and
Mhm.
those skills as they go. And so for that reason, I do like having a curriculum I work through for math.
What are some of your favorites?
I really like the good and the beautiful for math.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I work primarily in the homeschool setting, at least with the littles, kindergarten, first, second. Um, Ask me when we get to third. That will change. It may. But my daughter is so visual. She loves the stories. It'll have a girl's name and, she's making a dress for her little sister. And so we need to see what patterns she needs for the dress. And so we'll give her pictures to choose from and she loves it.
Mhm,
She looks forward to it. So I know it's working for her now. As we
mhm,
move,
mhm,
as she gets older, her development and her interests will change and we'll navigate that with curriculum when it comes. But I will say I pull in a lot of things during math to make it as concrete in her face as possible. So if we're going to be working on teen numbers, I'm going to
uh-huh.
make sure it's not just an auditory thing. We're seeing, we're manipulating it in some way. But yeah, Good and the Beautiful, they have some. The reason I chose them for math especially is they make sure that they meet kind of, I know we don't teach to standards, so I don't want that to be misunderstood, but they do make sure that no matter where you live, if you use their curriculum for math, you're kind of addressing everything for your state when it comes to what learning needs to happen for that grade level.
Mhm.
So it kind of lessens the chance of having a learning gap in math. Um,
Okay.
so
Okay.
that's why I choose them. I know there's
Yeah.
others that are just math, UC, the letter U. If you do have a dyslexic child, that's a great one for them.
Okay.
It's very black and white. Um, there's nothing frilly about it, but it comes with a massive kit so that there's a lot the kids can work with. So if that,
Okay.
appeals to a child, that would certainly be another great one that I always kind of lean towards.
Okay. Awesome. Now, what about when a child is struggling with reading? Do you have some steps that you could share with parents to determine if it's dyslexia, another issue, or maybe it's just like you said, everyone reads at a different time and space. Which,
Yeah.
quick side note, English is not the easiest of languages.
No, it's not. And our brains have to be wired to learn to read. We are born and ready to learn language, like the spoken listening, but we have to literally create the pathways of the brain for reading. And
Mhm,
so it's nothing to rush. When we're teaching kids to read, it's so challenging, um, for them both cognitively, um, perceptually, and it's such a big thing for them to have to learn at an early age that it can't be rushed. If we are building a firm foundation, we're doing the best we can, um, with getting them where they need to be.
mhm,
I mean,
mhm,
it really, when we think about the left and right side of our brains having to work together when we're reading, it's quite phenomenal how our bodies are designed and made, when
mhm,
you look at it
mhm.
from an educational standpoint. But
Yeah. Yeah.
I kind of follow, I kind of a four-step process when we're looking at if a child is dyslexic. Kind of want to check off some of the initial things first. And then, if necessary, like that very last step is further testing. Um, I was teaching phonics at my local library, and we would have kids come in. It's kind of similar to what I do with the pod on Monday, Wednesdays, but it was a Tuesday morning class of 45 minutes. And I would teach kindergartners for 45 minutes and then first graders and whatnot. And I sent lessons home with the families to work on during the week. And one of the moms came to me and she said, I didn't know my kid couldn't rhyme. He had no rhyming skills.
Hmm.
If we look at kind of some of the research, that is like the number one prerequisite to reading is making sure your child can rhyme. So those Dr. Seuss books, keep them going because those are some of the best reading materials that you can pull out. Um, so one of the first things I will talk to families about is does your child have phonemic awareness? Can they rhyme? Can they separate sounds in words? Can they count and clap the syllables in words? Can we manipulate words? So, like if we say airplane, can you say it without air? And they're saying plane. Can we do some of those kinds of things? Can we count the number of words in a sentence? In other words, do they hear that break and understanding of words have their own place within a sentence? Um,
Mm-hmm.
so, first we look at, do they have a solid foundation of phonological awareness? Because much like a house, you have your foundation, which are your early learning and literacy skills. And then from there, if you think about like the walls going up, that's your phonemic awareness. So that's prerequisite to reading. We're not even at reading yet. We're building phonemic awareness. We're rhyming. We're playing word games. We're, changing the first sound on words, asking for the first sound in a word. If I say cat, can you tell me the first sound? So we're really focusing on the walls of that house.
Mm-hmm.
Even the vowels. Can you hear the vowel sound in cat?
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me what the vowel sound is? The final sound in words. So just like a lot of manipulation with sounds and words and things like that. And then you move into phonics. So that's kind of like your roof. And
Okay.
then you move into more of what you would find in like second, third grade of vocabulary, the structure of language. So those are kind of like putting your final pieces on your house, your doors, your windows, and then you're focused on fluency and comprehension. You don't want to move into fluency until the phonics and the phonemic awareness is strong.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because without good foundation, you're not going to have strong fluency. And then, of course, your comprehension breaks down too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I'll talk to families and say, okay, do we have good phonemic awareness? Do we have those early reading skills? And then we say, well, yeah, they're rhyming. They can manipulate sounds. We have some of that there. So then okay, let's have an eye track test done. Let's check the tracking of the eyes. Is everything kind of working okay there?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then, we kind of went over some of those things that you can kind of test at home if you want to try to see first at home before you take them into an eye doctor. But
Okay.
then and I think doing eye tracking tests at home is great for any kid, even if you don't suspect it. I think it's great to, work those muscles and things. But if you're not seeing any improvements after doing some of those eye exercises at home, the next thing we look at is retained primitive reflexes. And that's
Interesting.
another big one.
I
Yeah.
haven't heard of that one.
Yeah. So it's kind of up there with the eye tracking in terms of like not talked about a lot. I had a student come
Yeah.
in. He was holding his pencil with a full fist grip
Okay.
and writing. And on the first day, I kind of just watched and observed. And then on the second day, I went up to the mom and I said, have you noticed? And she's like, yes. She's like, I was wondering if you were going to say anything. And so that is a palmar grasp reflex. And that just means that as a child, very young infant, toddler, he didn't lose his reflex. And so that's how he grabs and holds his pencil. And so it's going to impact pencil grip, fine motor skills, hand weakness, isolating fingers, hand eye coordination. Even like when he writes, there's like a mouth hand connection. So his mouth will move when he's writing. And he would chew on his shirt. So he'd put his shirt in his mouth and chew on it. And so she, a lot of times, you start kind of with talking with maybe an OT or PT. If you go to a pediatrician, you can ask them and they can tell you what specialists to see. And so he went in and they are just doing exercises with his hand, basically stroking his hand a lot, trying to release that reflex. And there's others, there's STNR, and you can have that if your child struggles with focusing or coordination. Um, you can look for retained primitive reflexes. And it's like one of those things
Interesting.
that's like, same with eye tracking. Why is not this not like a standard thing that we look for?
Mm,
I I take my daughter to a pediatrician, um, and we have certain choices within what we do there, but I feel like they should have just like, as she was developing, checked for those things. Like, is she
mm,
retaining her reflexes?
mhm,
Because then early on, we can address those and say, this is going to turn into this later on as they're trying to learn, and
mhm,
hold
mhm,
pencils um and again, there's things you can do at home to see, is my child retaining some of these reflexes? So back to like that W sitting, that's indicative of STNR, and it's just a neck reflex. And you can have your child get on all fours, kind of like they would be like pretending to be like a horse or dog or something. And then you can hold their head so their arms are out straight, they're on all fours, and you're moving their head up and down. And as they're doing that, you're looking to see if their elbows buckle. And if they do, then it's possible that they still have that reflex. Um, and then there's another one you can check to see left to right. If you do the same thing, they're on all fours, move their head left to right. If their elbows buckle again, then that's ATNR. It's a different reflex. And that's going to go along with their focus and coordination. Zombie test, to put your arms out in front of you. The kids put their arms straight out in front of them, and you just move their head left to right. And if their arms follow to the left or right as their head is turning, we call it the zombie test.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
Yeah. And here's the interesting about that one: 50% of kids that retain the ATNR reflex struggle with dyslexia. So it
Hmm.
goes
There's a
to,
correlation there.
there's a correlation. So, like I was saying earlier, we're just so quick to throw this label. Well, kid is dyslexic,
Mhm,
because we just see those markers of, oh, they're flipping letters, or they can't copy from a list, or whatever you might see
mhm,
in that child, when really there's so much more we can dive into before putting that label on them, and then addressing those. It's like putting a band-aid on. Let's address the cause, not the
mhm,
symptom.
mhm,
Why are
mhm.
those things happening? And so
Have
um
you have you or is chiropractic care something that you found benefit in? And I know that more people are starting to understand the fascia and fascia tightness and, again,
mhm,
going back to pregnancy, right, in the womb,
mhm,
how babies are born. I almost even wonder how the C-section rate might potentially influence this, or how babies are born, that a lot of babies are born under while mom's under the influence of pretty hard narcotics these days. So there's a lot of things running through my brain in the why, right? Now,
mhm,
obviously it sounds like some of this is just we're now understanding it,
mhm,
but I also wonder what parts of some of these things might be preventable or easy solutions found earlier, right? Like going to the chiropractor and doing
mhm.
facial release and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
curious your thoughts.
the C-section's a big one. We The other one is checking to make sure there's a lot of movement when the baby's developing, making, because there's, I think, theories are trying to answer a lot of that why, where is it's coming from, and are they being completely honest about what they're telling us as to why certain things are happening? But if there's certain traumas that are happening, even after birth, and we think about, you know, C-sections and things, we hear a lot of things, like you said, the narcotics, trauma to the baby. It doesn't always
Mm-hmm.
have to be a physical, it could be a neurological
Mm-hmm.
trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is some research to support that these retained primitive reflexes come from in utero, starting in utero. So seeing the chiropractor, making sure you've got healthy movement happening and things like that. But um, I have really my desire is to eventually become more into that why. Why are things happening? Understanding the research
Mm-hmm.
behind that.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but I have such a passion to tell parents that these are things to look at first before just going with, I think, the label is my child's dyslexic, or we have dysgraphia where kids struggle to write. They have it here, they have it in their brain, but to get it from their brain, the signal at least from their brain to their arm to their hand to then write, we have what's called dysgraphia. Have we looked at primitive reflexes? Have we looked at, like you were saying, chiropractic care? Are we looking to make sure that our body, our left and right hemispheres of our brain are balanced? That's a whole nother thing to dive into is balanced brains. Um, so I think, yeah, there's a lot that comes to mind when we say, why are kids having these retained reflexes?
Yeah.
But it
Yeah.
was alarming to me that 50% of kids who have a retained reflex, the AT and R1, struggle with dyslexia. There's a correlation there. Yeah. But
Mm.
there are activities. I encourage families to, kind of just look up reflexes and different activities you can do at home for each of them, and also try out the different tests. You can kind of just try them out for yourself. I do them on my daughter all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell her
Mm-hmm.
one of them
Mm-hmm.
hold a toy in each hand, and I'm just like randomly throwing her head back. She got that reflex, and she's
Mm-hmm.
sick.
Mm-hmm.
Just checking, making sure as we develop that those reflexes are not there anymore as she reads.
Mm-hmm.
But there's lizard crawl is another great thing. I think even as adults, we should still be crawling.
Oh yeah, I crawl during pregnancy a lot
Yeah,
because there's a lot
yeah,
of benefits to that.
yeah.
And then, I mean, after I gotta crawl to pick up all these little toys. So,
I think some of these things are just not for kids, Like I think keep our brains working because lizard crawl, you're laying flat on your belly and you're manipulating your arms and legs while your head is turned. And let me
Mhm.
tell you, it'll work your brain. Like, I think it's great for adults. Um, but there's a game called Spot It, and it
Okay.
gives you these cards, and there's only one picture that's different from all the rest, and you have to kind of find what that one picture is for both cards, and that's great for visual discrimination and kind of helping with those retained reflexes and things. So there's a ton of things you can do at home. That's the beauty of this. It's not going to require intervention necessarily by a specialist. Like
Mhm.
families can support their kids and build that into their homeschooling day of I'm gonna, incorporate these exercises we do. Another one is a midline cross. One of my favorites. It's the easiest to do. Eventually my daughter will get into tennis just because of how much midline crossing happens during tennis.
Mm.
But yeah, great sport for midline. But
Okay.
you can put a sticker on the back of the hand of each hand, and then and they have to be two different kinds. Let's say you do like a heart on one hand and a star on the other. Well, then you're going to do the opposite sticker to the leg. So you're going to do like right hand with a heart, and then left knee with that same heart sticker. And then you're going to alternate so that the stickers are across your midline.
Okay.
And you just have your kids stand and match that right hand to their left knee and tap it. And then you go left hand to right knee, tap it, and you just keep going, tap across the midline. And it's great for brain development, like super easy. I'll do it with my daughter and with my kids in the pod when we're saying the alphabet. So we'll
Mm.
just cross midline A, B, C, So we're getting through our phonics and our midline crossing at the same time.
Look at that. Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah. So a lot of ways to incorporate it.
Yeah.
Um, there's a book, it's called Unlocking Potential, um, integrating primitive reflexes to support learning. I would recommend that to families. That's another great resource. Um, the doctor who put it out, he also has some courses on retained reflexes. So if it's something that families are wanting to know more about and kind of think that's something that they might see within their own child, there's tons and tons of resources out there on retained primitive reflexes. And I think a chiropractor would be great
Yeah.
to talk to about. Yeah, because I talked to my chiropractor about it as well, and kind of just getting his thoughts on his approach. And sometimes they'll just do a quick in office during an adjustment. They kind of are on board with some of that too.
Fantastic. Awesome.
And
This
then,
has been such great advice so far. Keep going.
I think when it boils down to like, you know, yes, when we homeschool, we don't technically have, a degree in education, but it doesn't. There's just these like highlights, these three things that I think just makes you a teacher. When it comes to reading, at least, and making sure that kids are getting what they need, and that's just make sure they have a really good phonemic awareness foundation, and then after that, check eye tracking, retained primitive reflexes, and then lastly, in this at this point, we've explored a lot of different things. We've looked at curriculum, we've looked at approach to learning, we've looked at, everything we've talked about. And then the last thing is, do we want to do further evaluation? Do we
Hmm.
want to
Hmm.
see how the child learns? When we receive information, we have filing cabinets in our brain, in essence. And when that information comes into our brain, we're filing information so that later on, when we need to retrieve that information, our brain can go to that file, pull it out, and give us what we need. Well, what we've learned about some kids and their learning is that they don't always file it in the right place. And so when they go to retrieve it, it's not where it's supposed to be, and they have to sort through a bunch of other files to get to what they need. And so when you're doing further testing, and we call it a full battery, it's a psychoeducational evaluation. It's done by a psychologist, and they'll do a group of tests, and they're just looking at how your child learns. They're going to look at verbal and visual. They're going to look at memory, speed. How are we processing? How's your child processing information? And it's just kind of a window into how they're learning. And I think my 15, 16 years of teaching, I've recommended this test maybe half a dozen times.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
to get to that point, we're saying, yeah, there's probably something we need to know more about,
Hmm.
and we need to know what that is because
Hmm.
um, short-term memory is way easier to remediate than long-term memory. So we want to know, is it a short-term memory remediation? Is it a visual discrimination thing that we have to work on? So it just kind of gives us that what we call full battery inside look
Yeah.
into a kid's brain. And that's where you really get a lot of answers as to why certain things have happened after trying everything else.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but that is costly. So I think
I'm
that's,
sure. Yeah.
yeah, it's one of the reasons why or at least as a full-time classroom educator, I was so hesitant to recommend it.
Hmm.
Um, insurance used to cover some of the costs of having an evaluation done. Um, Not so much anymore. But yeah, there's a point when you say, I think we need to know more. And that's where you would get the full test done.
Okay. And there's other types of therapies out there too, perhaps that might be the first line of resource for children, right? I mean, I know that depending on what's going on, right? Because this is,
Mhm,
you know, down that line, but
mhm,
there may be other approaches. Like you said, you gave a bunch of examples of things that parents can do to try to figure things out first. But it
Mhm.
sounds like honestly they should just call you and you can help them out and join your tutoring pods and you will practice and work on these things as they're learning. How about that?
Yeah, because even if your child is dyslexic, it doesn't mean that you have to have that diagnosed to help them. Like we
True,
don't.
true.
We just say, okay, we're gonna do a Orton Gillingham based program. That's
Hmm.
really what it boils down to for dyslexics, and
Hmm.
it's a spiraling um, curriculum.
Hmm.
So again, it goes back to how many exposures does a child need to retain something, and that would be more on the scale of several hundred versus a kid that's 7 times. So we're going to find a curriculum that meets their need despite whatever label or diagnosis they might get. So
Sure.
yeah, like so like you're saying, there's so much we can do and just modify and tap into those resources and therapies um, to help despite maybe not getting to the point of having a full evaluation done.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'd love to go back to your tutoring pods for a second because you obviously, I'm sure people listening are like, man, I'm in East Tennessee. I've got to talk to Joanna and get in on this. Can
Yeah.
you tell me a little bit about we already talked about really the benefits of it for homeschooling families, but can you share a little bit about your contact and how people can reach out to you? Are you guys accepting people into your tutoring pods currently?
Right now, we have a wait list for our tutoring pods, and we advise our families that are interested to fill out a registration form, which is on our website.
Okay.
Um,
And
and
that's
then
homeandschooltutoring.com.
that's right.
Correct. Okay.
Yeah. And there's a link at the top, and it will take them to another platform where we do all of our registration and um, documentation later on, like just contracts and things like that. But so it's a one platform that we use, and they fill out a registration form, and we'll add them to our wait list. And then come next year, when we go to open up spots, we always reach out to our families that have an application on file with us, and then we don't advertise any positions unless there's some left after that. So we do have a public Facebook page that families can follow. We have a private one as well for our current families, and that's where we kind of share photos and kind of day to day things. But our
Mhm.
public one kind of just keeps everyone up to date on registration. We
Okay.
are interested in expanding and having the opportunity to offer this in other locations.
Okay.
Um, so if yeah,
I love it. I love the
yeah.
concept. And if you're looking for the public Facebook page, it's facebook.com/home and school tutoring. So you can go check out, like you said, the photos and different things that are there.
Yeah. And we would love to start connecting with moms who are teachers and may
Hmm.
have an interest in doing
And
this.
expanding this. Yeah, I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, 'cause
Awesome.
yeah, there's value to having homeschool families have a resource in their area.
For sure. For sure. I'm sure a lot of people are going to be listening and saying, man, I wish I had something like this near
Yeah.
me. So I'm sure that, as you continue to grow this, you'll continue to expand it. Now, I have a couple
And
questions
we
for you before. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, and we like to follow the multi-grade kind of approach within our pods.
Hmm.
So, keeping K1 together and things like that, because they learn from each other. And I had the other day where my first graders were learning to count on by three three more from a number, and my kindergartners got to kind of watch in and learn, and my first graders became those kind of teachers for the little kids, the kindergartners. And so we
I
like
love
to
that.
follow the multi-grade approach because of what we were saying earlier on. Society, we started with one room class schools,
Hmm.
and there were multiple grades in one school. And so
Hmm.
there's so many benefits to that as well. So we like to, take that approach and keep that in line with what we used to do as a society because there's so much that comes from that. So yeah.
I love it. I love that. Well, I've got a couple final questions for you as we're wrapping up today. I'd like to ask real quick about kind of personalized learning and really how parents can individualize their child's learning experience at home, especially, we've been talking about these learning disabilities and things of that nature. And then perhaps any strategies that that might be helpful in building confidence in kids and
Yeah.
not so much a focus on you have this learning disability. I don't know if how that cognitively impacts children to think about it from that perspective versus I'm just learning. So,
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
Yeah. One of the biggest things I like for young kids is to keep things very playful, learn through play, um, so that, like we were saying earlier, they feel like they're playing, but they're also learning. So individualizing it and where, you're building on your own child's interests and then incorporating the learning through that. But if we look at kind of how the right and left brain work individually and then of course together, um, there's some skills that the right brain kind of specializes in, and there are activities that we can do for the right brain. And so, if we want to individualize for our child and making sure we're developing the right hemisphere of our brain, then we're looking at making sports kind of a part of a child's day. Soccer is a great one to start out with. It
Okay.
helps with spatial awareness. So we're aware of our surrounding, that there's other kids here. I'm moving within my own space and someone else's space. So, yeah, soccer is great for that. Bike riding is great for the right hemisphere. Sensory play. All these sensory bins became a big thing all
Yeah,
over
they sure
Pinterest,
have.
I think. So, the colored rice with all the things that, go into it. But yeah, it's a lot of
Mhm.
sensory play. Play-Doh, being outside, dress up, a lot of imaginative play, dancing, audiobooks, crafts, lots of movement. That's all going to help the right hemisphere of a child's brain. And so if you feel like you want to improve your child's like creativity or mental math is right brain. So if we want to, kind of address that, then we're going to do the activities that go along with that, such as sports and outdoor play and charades and audiobooks and things like that. If
Mhm.
you are looking to kind of develop the left side of your child's brain, because there's a lot of research that says, a balanced brain is when kids will um, be ready to learn to read. It
Mm,
correlates back to reading, a balanced
mm,
brain.
okay.
Um, so left hemisphere, we're looking at like things like handwriting, symbols, so that'd be like letters and numbers, language, both spoken and written, reading, phonics, sequencing, following directions. So that's all left brain, and things for that you want to do memory games, play Legos, cooking, word searches, those are good. If we truly think a child is dyslexic, we would want to lean away from those just because of the way the letters will scramble and things like that. But the spot it game I mentioned earlier, those are great. Crocheting, stringing beads is
Mm,
good, and math games, puzzles. So that's all going to be helpful for the left brain. So, if you're kind
mhm,
of seeing, "Well, we need some help with handwriting and, things like that, then there's activities you can do to build that side of the brain. And that's the beauty of homeschooling is we're going to be recognizing so much earlier on what a child needs
mhm.
and
You can
individualizing
address it.
that child. Yes.
Yeah.
Um, so I mentioned Piaget earlier, and kids will do so much better with their learning if they can do it rather than just hear about it. So when you're looking to individualize, just making sure that your child is ready. And if they're ready to learn something, that you're making sure that they have the opportunity to do it. And we're not just like talking about it from a textbook. I
Mhm.
just remember in the classroom teaching about um, volcanoes from this book. It's just
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
book. And we're reading about it and we're looking at these pictures, but making it so that it becomes real to them in some way. And so building those volcano structures, getting their hands messy with that Play-Doh and plaster or whatever, making it so that they can kind of get their hands on it.
Mhm.
Um, so going along with Piaget's theory, that is, there's certain levels of learning that kids move through. The first one is ages 0 to 2, and then the other one is 3 to 7, and then I think the last one is 8 to 11 in terms of ages.
Mhm.
And they move through these levels, and kids have to master one before they can move into the next one. And there's some, those numbers are very fluid. Of course, kids don't stay within those parameters,
Mhm.
but we want to make sure that when the brain is developing and we're doing activities with our kids and seeing where there's opportunity for growth, we're thinking about, are we creating experiences that are helping them move through those levels? Um, and then kids learn from each other too. So, taking them to the playground and play dates and things, they learn so much from each other.
Mhm.
I, One day this summer, my daughter was talking to some kids she saw on the playground, and she was telling them about cicadas. We had that huge influx of cicadas this year, and
Mhm.
the little boy was like, "I say what? Oh, what?" Like, and so she went into great detail about cicadas, including how they recreate and
That's hilarious.
yeah,
He goes home, "You'll never guess what I heard
I
today."
learned today. Yeah, so thanks to my husband.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, so yeah, it's great. Um, but if you are looking to kind of just very simple and easy ways to support your child and kind of build their confidence, if you're noticing like they're struggling with handwriting or can't recall how to write a letter or
Mm.
number, it's great to have basically you can make it at home, just a strip, a long strip with all the letters of the alphabet, uppercase, lowercase together,
Mm.
written across that strip from left to right. And so anytime they're writing, just have that strip out in front of them. And so they have
That's a
this
good
reference
idea.
to go to when they're writing. So it's not this, again, abstract recall. And
Mhm.
then by seeing it visually as they're writing, you're giving them that exposure.
Mhm.
If they are that child that needs to see it hundreds of times before it's stored into that file in their brain,
Mhm.
that I remember a B goes this way versus a D. Um, so alphabet strips are great for handwriting. There's also lots of cute little sayings for how we write our letters or numbers, like, 3 around the tree, or 5. There's like little short little like poems, with the belly and the hat. So just kind of verbal cues, something that makes it fun and more, it'll stick a little bit better. Um, and then I would say and this would be like a general term, but most kids through second grade, I think you want to approach every math lesson with some kind of manipulative.
Yeah.
So if you're doing tally marks, we're using popsicle sticks or even toothpicks. Math, we're using counters or some manipulative where they can manipulate 2 plus 3 and, put those together or subtract. And for subtraction, you can roll up balls of Play-Doh, and they can squish the ones that they're subtracting. So 5
Mhm.
minus 3, squish the 3 that they're subtracting. But a good rule of thumb is through second grade, and I would argue maybe even later, but they would have a manipulative for every math lesson so that they have something tactile to solidify because they're kind of in that concrete stage where they're
Mhm.
not very good at thinking things abstractly. They need to have it in front of them.
Mhm.
So that'll, really build kids' confidence because they'll feel like they have some kind of support, something to rely on and use when they're not feeling like they are confident,
Mhm.
to do it on their own.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so a lot of visuals, a lot of hands-on that will build confidence for kids.
Good.
Even finger spacing between words, that's a big thing trying to, and it correlates to reading too. When we're writing sentences, is to put spaces between words. And so sometimes we say finger space. So while they're writing with their right hand or left hand, the other hand is helping to space the words. So you put your finger down and, they can put that space between the two words. If you want to be creative, you can get a little spaceman puppet or print out a spaceman and put him on a popsicle stick and he's the space,
Mhm.
between the words. So
Mhm.
there's fun things. So It's always been my approach is if there's something that's really challenging or would go as far to say challenging and frustrating, there's always something out there that can help. There's something you can do that will help that kid not feel so frustrated in that moment.
Sure.
Like a
Yeah.
hundredth chart for math would be another good thing to have out.
Say that again.
A hundredth chart
A
from
hundreds chart. Okay.
yeah. So some of those resources just kind of out and available for whenever they need to write. Like you were saying earlier with
So
your daughter, there's a seven
yeah,
in that number.
that would help her to not think that I was 70 for sure. I think I need to get a number chart out. And I don't have a letter chart, like you said, the alphabet
Yeah,
out when she's practicing her writing. And I do think that that would be very helpful. So I'm just absorbing right now all of
yeah.
this amazing information you're sharing.
My daughter has a hard time remembering her team numbers, but it's like 1 6, 1 7. And so I have just labeled the stairs just recently of our house. And we have 19 stairs going up to our second floor.
Mhm.
So every step has a index card that I just wrote the
Wow,
number on.
well, that's
So
smart.
as you go up, we can see it, we can count it, and then what's even better is we can count backwards with that too. Because
Mhm,
counting backwards, like if you're teaching your kid to count forward from 1 to 10,
mhm,
teach them in the same moment from 10 to 1. Because just as important as it is to count forward, we want to teach kids how to count backwards too.
mhm, mhm,
So yeah, there's moments when as your child's teacher, you're just saying, okay, this isn't working. How can I help them? How can I support them? Because no kid is ever going to go into a lesson and purposely make it challenging for themselves. They're
mm,
never going to give pushback
mhm,
and be give me a hard time about it because they
mhm.
want to. It's
Of
indicative
course.
of something underlying. They don't feel confident. They feel like it's overwhelming. Um, I made a checklist for my daughter because, to get through she does piano. And so to get through like these are our main goals for today, just so she can see and it's not overwhelming, we can check things off as we go. And
Mhm,
that for another kid that's maybe in fifth or sixth grade and they have a big sheet of math work to do, fold the sheet in half or cut it in half and only show a portion of that so it's not overwhelming. Break it into smaller tasks and chunks. So if
mhm,
you ever feel like you're getting pushed back or it's just, not enjoyable, just step back, even if you have to take a day off and say, what can I change? What can I do differently that's going to give my child that little extra support? Or, why is it overwhelming to them? A lot of times when we do math, kids will give us an answer and it's wrong. Oh, no, it's wrong. Erase it and fix it. Where I want to hear, how did you get to that answer? Have them explain their
mhm,
approach
mhm.
and their thought process. So then you know exactly where it is that, quote, it's gone wrong and you can help them. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. You have given so much incredible advice so far. My kind of last questions for you would just be any additional tips that you want to share, especially for those that are potentially new to homeschooling and kind of unsure? Or, how can parents encourage and or feel encouraged during these challenging times, and just anything else that you want to share with us today?
I would encourage families to reach out to an expert, someone that they can talk to. Um, Even
Mhm,
knowing what I know, every opportunity I have, if I'm in the room with someone who I can just glean a little bit from, I'll ask questions and get information. But a lot of times, consultations, there's a lot of specialists offering free 15-minute consultations and they're doing them by Zoom.
mhm,
And just reach out. There's a lot of Instagram accounts that have information about the primitive reflexes and the eye tracking and things like that. And if you find an account you like or a person by way of recommendation, because I do have a place in Knoxville that I always recommend my families to for eye tracking.
mhm,
Um, so if anybody wants to reach out, I can give them the information. But um, talk to an expert, just ask questions, maybe see about getting some free consultations and it'll kind of just get the ball rolling. It'll answer some questions you might have, and then kind of maybe give you a next step, something else to look into. Um, and also, parents are their child's biggest cheerleader. We are meant to be their cheerleader. Let someone else do the hard work of addressing what challenges are there. And so, if that's by way of taking them to some kind of therapy or having the other person be the one to say, your child has a, eye tracking challenge and we're going to do vision therapy at home, let that person be the one to say, well, they're not, going to be able to just do 6 weeks. They're going to need 3 months or whatever it might be. But you're cheerleading your child through that. You're cheering them through what it is that they're being challenged with.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
because we want to build the confidence in our child because there's going to be a lot that they go through, especially if they have learning challenges. They're doing the best they can. I can't tell you how many times I have parents sitting down and telling me how frustrated they were because their kid wouldn't read or didn't want to read or, were challenged, and they would get frustrated. And I'd say, they're not doing it on purpose. They're not
Absolutely.
wanting you to feel that way. They
Hmm.
just don't know how to communicate. A lot of times with vision, a kid's not going to tell us, I can't quite see that the way I think I'm supposed to,
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
and it's the same thing with their brain, with learning challenges. They can't communicate that, what, I think this is harder than it should be. They just know that it's hard. And so we just encourage our kids that when we are growing, we are facing challenges. And when we're making mistakes, we're learning. And much like, you have to have rain and you have to have sun to make a rainbow. So we're going to have the good and the bad, and we're going to work through it together. And so, yeah,
I love it.
be your child's cheerleader.
I love that. Yes, such great advice. Thank you so much for everything that you have shared today. You are such a wealth of knowledge. I have personally learned so much today and so many things I need to digest, and I can't wait to start applying with my own kids. So thank you.
You're welcome. And if
And if
anyone wants to reach out, yeah, I'd be
yeah,
happy to.
what's the best way for them to reach you?
Home and school tutoring at gmail.com. They can email
Okay.
me. Um, and I can either send out resources that they may need or kind of steer them in the right direction. I, yeah, I'm not a psychologist, so don't treat and diagnose. I just, I am there to support and help in any
Okay.
way possible. But yeah.
Awesome. And if you'd like to find Joanna online, you can find her at homeandschooltutoring.com or on facebook.com/home and school tutoring. And thank you so much for tuning in and being on this journey with us. If you would like to follow along outside the podcast, you can do so on Instagram and Facebook at The Radiant Mission. And of course, you can watch this in video format on YouTube. And today we are going to close with Proverbs 22, verse 6. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. We're wishing you a radiant week, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.